Hey, welcome to the January 29th, 2024 school board meeting. We're meeting for the purpose of the second interview for the director of schools. Our three candidates that are here are Dr. Mars Berard, Dr. Corey Duke, and Dr. Christy Southerland. And Dr. Miles Berard is going to be the first interviewee. We did it by random pick. Dr. Corey Duke, Dr. Christy Southerland are back with Miss Vivian so that they don't hear this first interview. We're going to each have a set of questions we want to ask. I'm going to ask if you try to keep it to 10 minutes or less. You want to go first?
That's fine.
Vandervoort?
That's fine. Thank you. Dr. Bard, thank you for being here tonight. Congratulations, and glad you came back.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So I have some general questions and then maybe a few more specific. I've got about 5 or 6 questions. If we can kind of limit it to around 2 minutes for each question. So what are your thoughts on the universal use of vouchers in Tennessee public education, and how they'll impact public education? I know that's an issue that's before the legislature is being considered. So we would like to know I think other board members would like to know your thoughts on that and opinion on that. I just heard this morning that it would cost the state somewhere around $140 million, 2,600 teachers could be hired, but for the use of those dollars. So tell us what your thoughts are on vouchers.
Appreciate that question, Mr. Vandervoort. First, I just want to say congratulations to Dr. Southerland, Dr. Duke, for making it this far. It is a process. And so last time I was here, Dr. McCord and I were laughing because it was windy on that Friday evening, and she decided to have school. And since then, we've been out of school about 11 days total with the weekends. And so I hope that's not a forefront to what's next, because it is getting cooler again. I don't have the days. We would have to make up days at this point. So thankful to be here again today to be able to speak to all your questions. Look forward to all your questions. On vouchers, I am a product of public school. I'm going to be a big advocate for public school. And I believe that the voucher system is going to deter and move dollars that are away from public schools that are, again, by law, students the age of 6 to 18 are afforded, and that's a constitutional law, a federal law. And so those students have to have a place within the public education system. Private schools, obviously, voucher schools, charter schools, all those things can get to pick and choose who they wish to have. The problem that I have, and as a director right now that we are having conversations around, is the accountability is not the same between charter schools or private schools, for that matter, and public schools. We are held accountable to a standard where we are most recently just got a grade for our school and our school district, and those charter schools don't have that same accountability. We have testing that students must take, most likely grades 3 through 11, but I know sometimes some districts choose to test their second graders. And so we are very adamant that we are against vouchers.
Thank you, sir. Second question, what are your thoughts on the state of Tennessee's adoption and implementation of the third grade retention law? And specifically, again, I know it's a law, but now they're implementing it. What's your thoughts on it?
My thoughts are it's too late. By third grade, yes, we have an idea, but in my world right now, there's a game around it. You can game that system by retaining your child, which is not always best for all children. But I know in some states, I know in some districts, especially if you are going to play athletics, it's best that you retain your child before grade 3, so either kindergarten, first or second, whether they need it or not, because their body develops differently. Minus athletics, I think that third grade is too late. I think that the hyper focus needs to be on K1 so that we can build that strong foundation in those boys and girls before they get to a testing subject or a testing grade, because I just feel like that, by third grade, we've already had influence. For some of those kids, we've had 4, 5, 6 years if they've been in the pre-K program. And so we should know where our students are at coming out of kindergarten and first grade. Those teachers do a great job at screening and also working hard to make a difference in those kids' lives.
So you're saying shift it more towards first grade rather than third grade?
I would. I think there needs to be an accountability piece, but again, I can't have 16-year-olds in third grade.
True. I want to talk to you about or ask about behavioral teams and student support specialists. What are your thoughts on the use of those in our schools, and how would you ensure that they're in every school?
I'm an old special ed supervisor. Behavior supports were huge. And I talked to you on the first interview that we developed an elementary discipline classroom called Fresh Start. Again, you got to have a positive connotation to it. You can't, these kids need they need a foundation. A lot of them were kindergarten and first graders who most likely needed a transition class, but in most school systems, you can't just afford another FTE to put a transition class in place. And so we would rehabilitate these boys and girls and it was no more than 8 students at a time within an elementary school. So training them of the proper behaviors is important early. Every child can be trained. Every adult can be trained, but it's harder as you get older because we become more stubborn. But as a child, even today in middle school, at work, they understand the expectations. They want discipline in their life. They just want to feel loved. They want a caring adult in front of them. So I would definitely support having behavior specialist within our school system.
Do you have those now in your system?
I do not.
Okay.
I do not. Currently trying to work with mental health. And one of the things I was actually the bridge between the school system in Oak Ridge. I was the bridge between the mental health provider and the school system. And so I would meet with them annually trying to help bring in therapists and behavior specialists that were actually paid for with the use of TennCare dollars.
How do you see their role in a school system, in a school specifically?
If they're contracted, they have to feel like family. If they are not an actual faculty member of the school system, you have to work with the principal and you have to work with the staff on making them feel like family. And that goes for any contractor. That could be OT, that could be PT, that could be your SLPs. If they're not on staff, then you have to make them family. And you have to continue, again, that partnership. We talked about stakeholder excellence as the 5th pillar last time. And that partnership is huge. And you have to reach out to all those partners who have those degrees and those certifications that would be able to help those students who need that level of attention.
Okay. So you're applying for this position, as I understand. Are there other positions that you are currently awaiting hearing back on? Have you applied for other positions? Director of schools positions?
No, sir. At this time, I'm currently employed as director of schools, and this is the only position that I have applied for.
Understood. Understand that. How would you, if you were hired, how would you handle the hiring yourself? Would you come in and maybe replace everyone, or would you make everyone reapply for their positions? How would that work? How would your administration look initially?
So in my last 3 stops, I would suggest to you that it's not just get rid of everybody and have everybody reapply, even though I know that that is an option, but I'm going to suggest to you that's not the best option. I would suggest to you that I met with my leadership team very first before I became employed at Hollow Rock Brewston, and I volunteered to go in before my employment began to meet with the former director, but also the leadership team. I needed to understand and hear it from them. Because everybody you talk to, just like everybody that calls you or emails you, they're going to give it from their perspective. And so sometimes, as I said, you got to first seek to understand before being understood. And sometimes you got to be able to take in all that information. You have to be able to listen. There's some good, there's some bad, and there's some ugly in every situation, in every environment. And so being able to go and listen to that and being able to utilize some of the leaders that are already in place are huge resources. Okay, your principals, your supervisors, your directors of different departments are big resources because they've been the boots on the ground. For somebody who's an outsider, they're the boots on the ground right now. But I would also say that my philosophy is I'll coach you up before I coach you out. If somebody is lacking in their ability to perform the duties where they're at right now, I'm going to coach you up before I coach you out.
Okay, thank you, sir. One other question, final question for me. You're now familiar with our system. What change would you implement to improve the Dickson County educational system almost right away?
Well, I think, let me just grab these stats, but I think when I looked at some of your numbers, your chronic absenteeism, I think, is going the wrong direction. First and foremost, we've got to get kids in schools. And you've went from 2019 from 7.6% to 2022 to 27%. That's a huge increase. And I understand COVID played a part in that, but we've got to get past that excuse of COVID. I also know you have a virtual school, but how are we effectively using your virtual school if that's going to be an option with the school system? I would also suggest to you that grad rate is reducing. It has gone down. It has gone down from last year, from 20 to 21. I don't have your figures for 22 that weren't available to me. And then your ready grad rate is at 37.9%. And so those types of things is how do we grow those students to be a ready grad, to be able to take on this world, to be able to be employable or to go on into college if that's what they choose to do.
So on those two issues, chronic absenteeism and the graduation rate, what would you do? How would you work to modify or change those numbers?
I think that you got to be consistent in your drive at where you're going. And so if you're going to do a drive for 5, we're all going to miss less than 5 days. But when I say that, it's also important that staff miss less than 5 days. There is no better replacement than the actual teacher in that classroom. It is important that teachers are showing up to school. So if our chronic absenteeism is within a certain classroom or school, I'm going to also look at the teacher, but I think that we also got to partner with parents and talk about the importance of education. If we don't get parents to believe, and every community has the parents who struggle with the value of an education. They want to blame everything on the school, no matter what happened to their son or daughter. And so I feel like that we would have to put a focus on, we've got to be in school. This is your only job. You think about the things that we ask kids to do. We ask them to show up. We ask them to complete tasks. We ask them to problem solve. We ask them to work together as team and individually. What do most jobs do? Those same things. So the only job that a child has to do is show up to school.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Dr. Varb, I've got your name down since last time.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate the time to work on that too. And thank you for being here. The kind of building a little more onto Mr. Vandervoort's question, changing a director for whatever reason makes everybody feel uneasy, some more than others. And I think one of the biggest things that I hear is we're all going to have to look for a job, which I don't think there's anybody who come in and replace 1,000 people in the first day. What can you do to help get the present staff on board with a new direction, the ones that might be reluctant to follow other than just giving an order to follow direction?
I think that, number one, you have to go and be with your people. And I think that was one of the first things that I did before my employment started is I showed up over the summer when they had some training and I just casually met some people. I think that visibility and accessibility are so important, and those are two of the things that I feel most proud about as an administrator. If you look at my past history, I've never went in and just cleaned house in this director role, in my supervisor role, or my principal role. But I will suggest to you that after the first year, after I watched and I paid attention and I understood, again, people will not know what to expect unless they know what you inspect. All right. So what you inspect is what people become to expect. And so you do a listening tour, you have meetings, you get to know all your staff. You build that relationship because, again, it is, as a principal, after my first year, they may be watching tonight. Trust me, I was not the most popular person. I moved 11 teachers. All right. Within my elementary school, I had 5 teachers per grade level, but we were not cutting the grades in my elementary school. I had people in the wrong grades teaching, but they were comfortable. And what did I tell you last time I was here at the end of my interview. I said, why be comfortable when you can be better? And that's the kind of philosophy that I try to instill in staff members, is that why be comfortable when you can be better? I've got fifth grade teachers who probably need to be first or kindergarten or first grade teachers, but I've got first and second grade teachers who might need to be in one of those tested subjects. And so again, trying to align those teachers into a spot, number one, that they have a passion for, but two, that fits within their skill set. In terms of administrators, working as a supervisor of special ed or now as a director of schools, it was after my first year that I did replace a principal. Again, I just felt like that we were not getting the bang for our buck in an administration. There is something to be said about internal candidates and growing up through a system. There's also something to be said about bringing in some outside resources, because sometimes they can give a fresh perspective, a new set of eyes, and from a different lens. Again, I'm no better than anybody in this room. And again, thank you to everybody who showed up and everybody that's online, but I'm no better than anybody in this room. I do have experiences that have given me an opportunity to be able to excel in different arenas, but also be able to give me this opportunity tonight to be able to say, what can I do to help your system?
A lot of these questions are going to play on others at the same time, and I'm sure that's to be expected. But what do you think will be your greatest challenge working as a director of schools?
My greatest challenge will be getting people to believe in somebody who came from the outside. I think that, one, it plays in my advantage, but it also plays in my disadvantage right now. Because again, I don't live in Dickson County. I'm familiarizing myself with some of your communities and those names, but getting to know which road to take, where to stay out of traffic, which road not to take because the curve, I might be in the ditch because I went too fast or behind a horse and buggy, those types of things. Those are all nuances that I would have to learn. Okay. So I think that, again, no matter who you choose and select as your next director of schools, trust is going to be a big deal. You've got to embed yourself amongst almost 1,200 staff members here to gain that trust amongst all those, because, we talk about, do you just get rid of everybody? There's not 1,200 employees available for hire right now. There's probably less than 100. And, and today I'm dealing with a shortage of subs. I'm sure you all are dealing with a shortage of subs and people that want to come to work. And so that would not be a good move. It's saying, hey, everybody reapply or everybody go away, because we can't continue to lose some of the best teachers and the best TAs and the best administrators that you have groomed and or recruited to come to your system.
Will you share with us an example of a time when your authority was challenged as a director of schools?
Oh, I would say most recently, policy says that if you vape in school, then there's a consequence. Vaping is not allowed in schools. Children are not supposed to be vaping. Some parents don't agree with that law. That's a law. That's not a school rule. But in school, we have a policy that says you're not going to vape in school. You're not going to bring a vape to school. And I would say to you that you have a group of parents, not just in my community, in every community, who would just like to see a vape be a slap on the wrist. Oh, it's just a vape, and he or she didn't harm anybody. Just give them ISS or detention one day. Our policy currently reads your first offense is 5 days alternative school, second day 10 days, third offense is 20 days. So we've tried to take an aggressive approach. And when I told you in my last interview, last year I knocked out 60 some vapes. This year we've had 3, because I think that, again, being consistent and holding the students accountable and not backing down just because some parent wants to come before the board and complain about a policy, you show where your leadership's at. And again, vaping doesn't belong in schools. This isn't back in the day when we had smoking areas in schools. This is the new age, and there are laws and there are requirements, and those students who become distractions need to be removed.
I want to shift gears a little bit towards the budgeting now, away from policy. Are you familiar with zero-based budgeting?
No, sir. I've never heard that term.
The zero-based budgeting is basically where each major category would start with 0 and justify funding for each section.
I can go from there.
Do you see any advantages or disadvantages with using a budgetary process like zero-based? And Knowing there's state mandates that might limit some of that, is that something that you would think would be an advantage to try to use?
I wouldn't be opposed to it. You know, when you said zero based, I thought that may have been there, but I wanted to get further clarification. My current model right now is to hand every principal and director a sheet to be able to determine what are your needs based on your school or your department. And so you would look at the current budget right now to figure out where we have, and I don't like to use this word, but wiggle room. Okay, where can we find some funds? You know, if you're talking about trimming FTEs, if you're talking about trimming classified staff, reducing contractual type work, saving on lighting, you know, and again, reducing staff is not the most ideal because in some of our schools and some of our classrooms, they're probably stretched thin as they are. But I would suggest to you that energy is huge right now in school systems, and you have a lot of opportunities, not only grant-wise, but also these contractors who are coming in and finding ways to be able to, I guess, it's called the building envelope. You know, how do you preserve cold air from coming into those windows? How do you reduce some of the lights going to, you know, LED based or, you know, things like that? How can you reduce some cost? But I would also say that, you know, going zero, it just makes that director or principal be able to show, just going the other direction, show what he or she needs to be successful in their department or in their school. I'm not opposed to that strategy. It's the same to me because I would just give you what you got last year, and that's how I've done it. And again, meeting with that executive team and meeting individually with that principal and making the determination, how many staff does it require to run your building? But if you want to start adding things like behavior specialists, or you want to start adding additional teachers or TAs to be able to support some of these students, you have to be able to find that within your budget and not just keep asking for more. County commission, city council, the people who pay the taxes don't always want to hear about, hey, I just need more money. I need more money. You've got to put up the results. And I'm okay that the grade card came out or that they graded each of the schools. I think that's an accountability piece, but you've got to show the results of where the money is going and why we spend as much as we do.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Chadwick?
Thank you for being back. How do you view the relationship between, say, the central office and the school board? I've been here a long time, and there's been times that it's like it's us versus them. Sometimes it's us, you know, the teachers and so forth versus them, and then sometimes it's them versus us. You know, how do you view what sort of relationship would you like to cultivate between the central office and the teachers and the board?
I think first and foremost that a director must speak and recognize their board members at certain events that you all are public. Okay, we currently do that right now. I think that it's important that people hear the director speak of board members in a positive light, even though we may disagree on certain things, and that's okay. We're not always going to agree on everything, but I think that people need to understand that you volunteer for these positions. And you all have spent countless nights and hours recently in a lot of board meetings to be able to make this decision. I would suggest to you that something I did in my current role is so we have badges. All the staff now have badges. They didn't when I first showed up. And we made IDs so that I could identify, because I'll be honest, there are some staff members who just graduated college. They look just like some of the children. And so being the new guy, it's nice to have staff IDs so that you can identify, oh, that's an adult that works for this system. But I would also suggest that I had each of the board members get an ID as well, because number one, whether they wanted to open the door, the secretary at the school wanted to open the door or not, you have to be made to feel welcome. That is very important to me, no matter who it is or what somebody's done, unless it's a harmful situation, everybody needs to be made to feel welcome coming in. And so I presented them with a badge so that they could come to any event in the school, but then also just come into the building. I think that it's just as important as, you know, and when you talk about the relationship, I think of visibility and accessibility. Again, two things I pride myself on. I think board members need to be visible and accessible as well. Not just to hear all the bad, but to also see the good. And something that my previous district did, and again, they had multiple schools. I'm all under one roof, so it's a little different as far as my setup right now. But when I had 9 schools as supervisor of special ed, each month the board met at a different school. That school principal, along with his or her staff, along with several student groups, would do a presentation about that. When you talk about visibility and accessibility, and it was normally first thing in the morning, say 7 o'clock in the morning, because obviously some of you have roles that you've got to get on to your and into your day. And not everybody could make it, but I will say that most board members made a point, especially when it could fit into their schedule, to go and they would hear about the great things of that particular school. And I think it's important because sometimes a school does not get highlighted as much as other schools because we don't go to that school as often as we do some of the others. And I think it's important that you brag on all your schools. You should be proud of all your schools. There are things that can be improved in every one of those schools, whether they were an A or an F, based on this recent report. And so I think that it's important that a director provide that opportunity to be able to go and see. And even the best thing that I've ever, as a teacher, as an educator, as an administrator, the best thing that I could ever present before you is a student who can do their own presentation. There is nothing better, and I hear you all got cards tonight that handwritten by first graders. There's nothing more special than when a student gives it to you from their perspective and shares the good news about his or her school.
In my time in the county, I've taught at both the high schools, one a lot longer than the other. And I know athletic wise, there's always, the competition, especially now that we meet, especially in the football programs. But in the past, there's been things said from one school to the other about the stuff between schools. Do you think there's any way to curb some of that?
I think rivalries,
They're good.
they're good. They're always going to be there. Okay. Again, I would put it back on coaches and adults, including parents, to teach their child about sportsmanship. All right. And I love to win. Okay. Who loves to lose? Okay. But there's something to be learned from wins and losses. And I think in the end that some of these students who, I understand you have the 2 high schools, some of these students are going to be working side by side one day, and they have to remember that. And so I think that you have to look at the resources that are being provided to one high school or the other, and I'll just use those 2 schools because that's what you directly asked about. You have to look at the resources. Are you being fair in all the decisions that are being utilized? Okay, if we allow Dickson County High to have 7 paid coaching positions and Creekwood High School only has 2 paid coaching positions, again, there's an equity issue. I know that the student body and the student population is probably different, significantly different, but is it fair to keep giving one school more than the other on that? Now, both can't have field houses unless you've already got them built. I know that's the big thing, or turf. Those are big ideas, especially in the football arena. But I do think rivalry is good because it allows the communities to come together. But I would also suggest those are opportunities to be able to highlight something within your school system that's important. If you're going to use a halftime of a football game or a basketball game, highlight something that's going on in your school system, because at this point you've got both sets of high school parents that are showing up at one of the 2 fields.
Well, I wasn't only just referring to sports, but to the staff of both high schools or all schools. I just won't put it to both, but sometimes, when we were a 5-star and you guys were only, whatever. How do you deal with that?
I think that you have to be an encourager. Okay. Something that again, I feel like has been a strength. You have to be visible within that staff. Go to that staff meeting, go talk about how is it that we can achieve and become that, that A. or be able to get those stars, become a reward school, because all the schools are going to help to either become an exemplary district or prevent it from becoming an exemplary district. And so everybody has to be on board of what that vision is. And anybody who doesn't believe that a child can learn probably shouldn't be in education.
The last time you talked about the things you did daily, a greeting, helping car riders out, helping them load in the afternoon. That would be quite different around here. So how would you deal with each school day by day?
So as a principal, I was a part of 17 schools. So obviously I was responsible for my one, and I spent almost all my time, unless I was in a meeting, in my school. As a supervisor of SPED, I had 9 schools that I was responsible for building programs for students with disabilities. And each day, if I wasn't out of town or in a meeting, I was in at least 2 of those schools. All right. Just make it be invisible. And again, I understand when somebody said, and again, reading over some of the information that was provided from the community feedback, is as a principal, if my director was supposed to show up 2 times to evaluate me, but if HR and my director showed up, somebody's probably in trouble. All right. And you want to get away from that thinking. And so by mentoring or modeling how visible and accessible we as central office staff should be, it takes away from every time somebody from central office shows up, oh gosh, somebody must be in trouble. It's got to be bad. We're either losing money or losing a person. All right. Principals in trouble, teachers in trouble, whatever it may be. I think that there are times when, especially the first day of school, we were assigned. And so one of the things that our director did in my last stop was that at the first 2 days of school, chaotic. You want to talk about chaos in the elementary school. Think about all the parents who drop off their kids. There's a lot of cars. There's a lot of moms and dads who want to walk their babies into school. Nothing wrong with that. But they deployed two people to each of the schools so that we were visible. How can we help? How can we just say hi to people? You know, I had questions of like, hey, where's such and such rooms? I didn't have that answer, but let me give you the person who can get you that answer. And sometimes just that personal greeting, that smiling face helps. Because a lot of times, you know, they see just the person in the shirt and tie show up when something bad's going on.
And what are your feelings about the concerns that some systems are having over inappropriate materials in the library?
I will say it this way. It's unfortunate that people have tuned into that right now. All right. There are books that have been on library shelves for a long time that now I just feel like, and I told you, I love this country. That is one of my top 3 things that I would talk about. I love this country, but I also think that my time up, I'm out. No. I would suggest to you that I feel like that in this country, we've also opened up the door that anybody who wants to speak their mind or seek to cause a little controversy, we have allowed that to happen. Again, there are materials in libraries. I would suggest to you outside of libraries, if you issue a one-to-one device, you provide a device, they have access to the whole world. Some of these kids are smarter than the filters we put on these things. And so it's no different than giving them a one-to-one device and them typing in some word that shouldn't be used in school. Okay. But obviously if they type in a certain word, images come up, or words come up that may be inappropriate for school. So to that, I think that, again, having a policy where people want it reviewed, just because somebody says, I don't like that book in your library, doesn't mean it should be automatically taken off the shelf just because one person complains. I think that you create a policy, which you may have. We currently have one that it would be reviewed by several members of the staff. The librarian, the school principal, probably a counselor, and maybe even a parent. Okay, let's get different perspectives on why this book is either appropriate or not appropriate. But I also think there may be ways that you can identify, hey, this may have sensitive material or talk about sensitive things that are not appropriate for certain age groups within a library. I don't know that there's a common denominator or a common solution to that, because no matter what book it is. If somebody really just has indigestion about that particular title or what's in that book, they're just going to keep going after that book. But I think if you follow your procedure and your policy, then people will welcome that at least you were consistent, at least you reviewed it, and you have taken it into account whether that book should be in the library or not.
Thank you.
Thank you again for coming, Mr. Hubbard. I want to touch on a couple things. You've already mentioned a few little things, so you don't have to expound upon them too in-depthly. But tell me, one thing you just had there was, do you believe that there is a correlation between the success of a student and the increased levels of parents' engagement in the schools?
Absolutely. That was what my dissertation was on, was the impact of father involvement in elementary schools. And I'm going to tell you right now, students are struggling right now to even have one parent in the house. Bless their hearts for all those grandparents and or aunts, uncles, and foster parents who have to take on kids because some adult, it takes a man and woman to make every child, right, but that some adults decided not to be responsible for. And so there is a correlation, a direct correlation. The more involved a parent, and again, not the helicopter parents,
right,
all right, necessarily like, over everything, needing a teacher to text them every 5 minutes. Is my child still breathing? Does my child have a temperature? What's he wearing right now? I don't know. You dressed them. And even if they dress themselves, we're just glad they're at school. All right. So I do think there is a direct correlation that, in my studies, dads only wanted to be a part when there was discipline or sports involved. And the thing is that moms especially were more involved in elementary schools. And that's what started me in becoming more intentional when we always had muffins with mom. But what in my research, it said we were never targeting dads, father-like figures. And so you have to be intentional when you're targeting those men, okay, whether they are the actual dad, the stepdad, the grandfather, the uncle, whoever is the father-like figure. And so we had Donuts with Dad. That's kind of where that concept came about, is so that we were able to open those doors for those men to also become part of their child's education.
Do you think discipline plays let me think how. What role do you think discipline plays in creating the right academic learning environment for our students?
Listen, there are students who are taking up space in our schools. And that's hard to say because I got into education because I feel like every child can learn. But I would also say that you have some who are, all they're doing is causing chaos within your hallways and in your classrooms. And those are hard conversations, but you better start planting the seed early with those families, especially when they're 16, 17, and talking about graduation. If they have 0 credits coming in as a junior or senior, it's going to be very difficult. I'm not going to say it's going to be impossible. You can put them behind a computer screen and get them graduated so it doesn't hurt your cohort, but it isn't the right thing to do. There's something to be said about seat time, but discipline, I think that if you're fair and you're consistent, all the way down in elementary school and middle school, and sharing what those expectations are, holding those kids accountable. But the same for staff. Administrators need to have a consistent policy or consistent procedures. If let's say a staff misses 10 days, is that the best staff member for your school? Let's say a kid misses 10 days. What are we going to talk about? We need to get that kid in school, because this previous break, you all were hit with the same ice storm and snowstorm that most of Tennessee was hit with. We have to retrain these students every time we're on long breaks. They show up in early August and we have to retrain them on some of the procedures. And I would suggest to you the last 2 years, one of the best things that I thought the middle school and high school did in my current district was we took the first week and went over all the procedures. It's easy to hurry up and get into the curriculum and to pass out all the books and all the worksheets and all the folders and the thousands of pieces of paper that we need a parent to fill out. But have we taught the procedures? Have we taught, here's where we're going to sit, here's where we're going to act, here's what the policy says about, and in the upper grades, it talks about cell phone, about dress, about bringing certain things to school. Again, you can't expect them to go home and a parent read that policy or that procedure to them. You have to train those kids.
Developing the right culture of an organization starts at the top. How would you go about developing the culture where all the employees that we have here felt valued, seen, and heard. And the
Again,
same for their parents.
visibility and accessibility. You know, it's easy for me to say that right now because I can attend most things. Right now, as the director of schools, you know, I get to volunteer and do the clock for basketball. I volunteer for the middle school football. I'm an administrator for the high school football. So I jump in because you know what? You need a lot of key players that can make decisions and or help out with knowing who to talk to when there's a question. I think that you build the vision around, you know, whatever those words are. You all have a current vision right now, you know, for the school system that was developed by the leaders, the previous leaders. I'm not going to say that anything on there is a bad thing. They obviously were student focused first, which in all decision makings, if it's what's best for students, it's what's right.
If you could quickly tell me about a weakness in your life or career that you've made a strength.
Oh, I was just hoping you stopped at weakness because I was going to say I can't sing. I would suggest to you this right here. The confidence of being able to speak in front of a group, no matter how big or small it is. If you would have known me in high school in 1990, moving to Marysville, Ohio, because that's where my mom and stepdad decided to put us. I had nothing because my dad moved every 3 years in the Air Force and then they were divorced. Okay. And so FFA was my go-to. Sports was not my go-to. I'm not good at anything. I can shoot a ball. I can throw a ball. I can pop a ball. That's about all I can do. Okay. I'm not going to try to dominate you on the court or on the field, on the gridiron. But what I can share with you is that I used to go to public speaking events, and my FFA advisors would be so proud. They're both teachers. They're still in the system. But I'd have to write out a 2 or 3 page, you know, it was a 5-minute speech. And I would literally get up in front of the crowd, the judges. And if this was a piece of paper, I would literally do this. The microphone would be right there and my eyes would be right here. And I would literally just read it verbatim, my whole speech. And so the confidence is a strength now. And I would suggest to you that when I went to undergrad, you ever heard the term fake it until you make it?
Yep. Now
I have that confidence.
When have you been glad to listen to an authority figure in your life?
I respect anybody who has something good to say and that has the wisdom of something that I don't know. I'm going to tell you right now, I could never be where I'm at without having all the mentors that have surrounded themselves that have more wisdom, that have more experience than I've ever had. And so they are authority figures to me. Okay, whether it's a board member, whether it's another director of schools, whether it's a former supervisor, I value learning more because it's often said that when you stop learning, you're dying. And so every day is about learning. And I've chosen the pathway of being a lifelong learner.
Can you tell me the difference between a leader and a boss?
A leader is somebody that people want to follow. A leader is somebody who would not ask a person to do something he or she is unwilling to do. A leader is somebody who is willing to humble themselves so much that they would go sweep their own floor or mop their own hallway. A leader is somebody who would go and shake hands with somebody who you disagreed with and say, hey, I appreciate and value what you're saying. Obviously, a boss is completely different than all those things. A boss is just going to say, go do this, go get that broom and sweep this floor. And people don't follow bosses. People follow leaders. Those are just a couple of examples that I would share.
Well, I'm looking for a leader. I'm looking for someone that'll listen to everybody and value their opinions. But I think a leader is someone that also has to make the hard decisions even when they're not popular.
Agree.
And that's what we're going to have to do. So I yield my time to Mr. Parker.
Do they ever call you Mr. H or Dr. H or?
They just shorten it to Dr. H.
Okay, I was thinking if we meet too many more times from now, we're going to have to shorten that up. I still ain't got it yet. So I'm here in the last number 6 right here. So a lot of my questions, some of these other members have kind of already hit, and I'm just going to kind of build on them just a little bit. So my first one is, please explain how you feel about discipline and the use of an alternative school. I heard you say you had an alternative school. We have one, it's called NDA, which is New Directions Academy. And also how you feel about our New Directions Academy being more of an umbrella school and not just a disciplinary jail sentence for a kid that did wrong. And then to add to that, what ages do you feel are appropriate to go to the alternative school? And how would you work with our juvenile court judge to help some of our more major disciplinary things going on?
That's a great question. There was a lot of questions in there, so I'll try I'll try to answer.
Start the top, go to the bottom.
All right, I'll see what I can do there. I would suggest to you that an alternative program is an appropriate placement for some students. All right, not all students. There are some that are in an alternative program because of disciplinary reasons. He or she needed a consequence because their behavior was so severe they needed to be removed from his or her school. And I think that that is very important. I think that you have to be very careful that the ages, which again, kids in kindergarten, again, is where school starts. Preschool is optional. All right, kindergarten is required. So from K-12, there's always a play within an alternative setting. But I would also suggest to you that I'm very mindful and very careful that we as teachers, we as educators, just because Miles Hebrard was a terrible student 14 years ago doesn't make my brother, Charlie Hebrard, a problem. Okay, so we have to get out of those labels. It's very important that we get out. Just because one student wasn't successful, sometimes, just like in leadership, people step up to the occasion with different leaders, their personality, their attitudes, their drive for life, and all those things. Students are inspired by certain men and women who chose to become an educator in a school system. And I think it's important that, number one, that the teacher values the child. Again, we're not employable. We're not employed if students don't show up. Parents drop off their very best every day to our school system. And we're not going to be employed if all these kids take this voucher and go to another school system or go to one of your private schools in your area or drive over to Nashville or wherever. Okay, you're close enough to be able to have that opportunity. You've got to be able to show that our classrooms are safe and our classrooms are full of opportunity that every child can succeed. For those children who it's not appropriate for, we need to find a strategy. And when I say strategy, if they're young, we've got to rebuild them. They've got a lot of years in a school system until the age of 18. I know that those students with disabilities have the opportunity to stay till 21, 22, but we've got to rebuild them and rehabilitate them so that they can meet the expectation of that school, of that teacher, of that administrator. But just holding on to kids because we're required to, that's difficult because in some, and I think that's why we're losing some of our teachers right now, is that we're not consistent and firm on all those policies or procedures that we hold one child to, but we don't hold the other child to. There are new laws that have been brought out. Now, I don't want teachers just putting a kid in the hallway like this kid don't belong in my classroom. That's not fair. Again, one of my go-tos is we make everybody feel welcome each day. That kid may have had a tough day the day before. And if he or she is going to come back the next day, they need to be made to feel welcome. And we also have to intentionally choose to find the good in each kid. Because you know what? Some kids, it's hard to sit for 5 minutes. This interview process would be tough for some kids because they got to bounce, they got to shake, they got to throw things at you and all those other things. We've got to find the good in that minute if they are doing that. And we've got to praise them for that. So going back to the alternative school, I think that there is a use for alternative programming. I think that having it not just this system needs to decide whether we're going to use it as discipline only, okay, or is this an appropriate education for some students? Support should be provided to that to your alternative school called behavior specialists. They should be, in my experience, I actually had students on IEPs. That was the best because the classroom sizes were smaller. That was the most appropriate education that we could give them because of that. And they didn't have to navigate our huge high school with 1,600 students. For some students, that's a big jump. But I would suggest that you create those procedures, and those kids were wanted every day. Those kids were required to turn in their cell phones every day. You have to remove those things that the kids in the other schools are allowed as a privilege to have. You need to remove those opportunities in an alternative setting, just so that they don't want to go to the alternative school. And again, if it's just a placement for a child because that's the best placement or most appropriate for that child, then you need to set those procedures in place and say, listen, we feel like you could best graduate right here. So depending on the space, never seen the school, so I don't know what kind of spacing you have. I do think that there are age appropriate type rooms. If you're talking elementary, I really feel like you need to have a K2 and then a 3-5. Kindergartners and fifth graders, they're different body structures. There's things that fifth graders know that kindergartners don't know, but I don't see you being able to afford, any school system being able to afford a kindergarten teacher, a first grade room, a second grade room, because the more rooms you create, the more somebody sees like, well, this child doesn't fit into my room. Let's put them over at the alternative school. And you have to be careful when you create such a program, especially for the babies. But the olders, sometimes it's, if you're coming in with zero credits, you've been in trouble in every school system, and we have to enroll you because you're not under a zero tolerance offense. That alternative school may be the best placement for that junior or senior because they may just be going in and causing chaos in a high school, and no principal needs another child just for the chaos.
And do you have an example of where you may have worked with your local juvenile court judge on disciplinary issues, or how would you involve him in major discipline issues?
So one of the things when we talk about vapes, one of the things that we've been consistent with is my SRO officer cites them from the legal side. They have to appear before the juvenile judge. And I think that shows that, there's another part to this process, because now you're going to have a record within the juvenile court system. And in our particular county, we have what's called Carroll Academy. That's a rehabilitation type school where only a judge can place you there. So we're fortunate to have that. Those are for those most severe cases of students who have either harmed another child by assault, assaulted a teacher, addicted to drugs or alcohol. And like I said, the judge can only place them there. We use what's called the alternative school. I can't refer to what's called Carroll Academy. I can only refer to the juvenile judge. I would suggest to you that the juvenile judge was my former school board attorney of the system. So I have a great relationship with him. It only helped because when I came in, he was our school board attorney, but obviously he had to remove that himself from that role because of the conflict of interest. And so I feel like I have a great relationship. Again, somebody who's a partner to the school system.
Thank you. And I'm going to build off a lot of the other questions, but in your first interview, Ms. Brogdon asked about what your biggest strengths. I'm going to do, unlike Mr. Underwood, I'm going to stop at weakness. I want to know what you feel your weakness is.
You know what my weakness?
Other than you can't sing. We know you can't sing.
Okay. If you want to know what my weakness is, and maybe it plays in my favor, maybe it doesn't, is there is no lid for me. When I tell you that I came in, took off the lid, turned the jar upside down, and let's make greatness from this. All right. If it's what's best for kids, then it's what's best for the school system. And I feel like that some people may see that as a weakness because they think, wow, they've got this, this, and this. But we found ways to be able to afford everything that we have put forward without having to raise taxes, now, is everybody going to agree with that? No, again, you coach them up or you coach them out. You plant your seed, you project your vision, and when you're visible, accessible, and able to listen to all staff. Again, I did that. What do you love about this system? What don't you like about this system? And what part can you play in it? That's where some of that vision comes from, is because, again, I've tried to put themes around all the energy, the positive and the negative, so that we can be great together.
You were talking about earlier holding children accountable, and at the point that the data, when I say the data, the teacher's grade shows that child should not move forward to the next grade. How do you feel about a child being retained because of I'm not talking about state testing or anything. I'm talking about the teacher's grade, holding the kid accountable for not being able to pass the teacher's class.
I think there's several pieces to that you have to unpack. First, I can't have 16-year-olds rolling up next to my elementary teachers. In my world, like I said, I had to program in the students with disability world, if they're afforded by law an opportunity to stay till 21, 22. So you strategically had to plan that most students leave elementary school at about 11, sometimes 12 years old if they have been retained. Sometimes you had to keep them a little longer so that you can spread them out and they're not in the high school for 8 years. They get bored in the high school for 8 years, even though there's a lot of opportunity in the high school. And so you have to be able to, when I have always had to backwards map with a parent, this is as a principal, as a supervisor, now as a director, had this conversation today. I always start at 18, because at 18, the law says you are now an adult. There is nothing as a school system I can do to prevent you from walking out that door. When you turn 18, you can turn 18 today and you could walk out that door. I'm not sending police after you. I'm not filing truancy because technically you're an adult. Now it hurts our system because they become a dropout if they don't show back up. That's not what I want. All right. So I think that retention is appropriate for some students. Again, foundational, those preschool teachers, I know that's optional right now. Preschool is important. I'd be okay if they went to universal preschool for all students who are 3s and 4s, especially 4, okay? 3, maybe partial days. But kindergarten, first grade and second grade, before they start taking that third grade test, it's important to establish early on if that child can read first, because if they can't read, they're going to struggle in all those other subjects, science, social studies, and math. And so I do think that there is a use for retention, not just based on a state test, but also, you value your teachers. But my challenge as a school principal was that I had 5th grade teachers who just wanted to assign 40 problems the night before, and they wanted to teach kids responsibility because you know what? I'm the adult. And I said, you're going to do 40 problems, you better do 40 problems. Well, guess what? 1-0, they've got to get 9 100s to even get it back to possible. And so guess what happens to a kid who keeps getting a 0 or said, you're never going to be anything in your life? That's not who you need in front of that kid. Because if they get 1-0 and they've already disappointed you and you've already dejected them or made them feel less than who they really are, why are they ever going to try? So I've been very critical about homework, especially when I was an elementary principal, and said, what's the difference between 40 math problems and say 5? Can't you get the same concept? And if you're not going to review homework, then why assign it? If kids are going to get a grade for something that you're not going to review, that's not fair to them because, again, you can pick and choose who passes and who fails. If you show up and you're never a behavior problem, you sit up front, you don't cause me anything, you could potentially get an A. But that person that shows up and that's disruptive, that's always talking back to a teacher, they may complete their work, they may not, but so there are some educators, not all educators, there are some educators who will not give that child a chance.
100 days in from the time that we plan on hiring a director is going to put us somewhere in the middle of the summer. What do you feel like you want to accomplish with Dickson County Schools if you're voted in your first 100 days?
Well, you're going to be right in the middle of budget season. So you better have met with every county commissioner, probably shown up at a couple meetings, but also planted that seed. I think it's also important, something that I haven't even mentioned to you all in all my stops, when I was named as principal, when I was named as supervisor, and when I was named as director, the first thing I asked for was a staff list and their phone numbers. And I just reached out to them. I still have those notebooks from when I was at Claxton Elementary School because I would call you. And of course, it was summer, so you may have been on vacation and it was okay. But it was important for me to understand, whatever you said, hey, just introducing myself, new principal, excited to be in your system. anything you need me to know, anything you want to share. Some would talk about their families. Some would talk about medical conditions. Some would talk about, I hate the placement I'm in, but nobody ever would listen to me. Some would tell you about what they love about the school or the district. I did that in all my stops. And I felt like I gained value early on because that was your start to listening, the listening tour. I would also suggest that you've got to be visible in each of those schools in the first 100 days, multiple times, not just once. All right. It's an uphill task because you're going to be in the middle of budget season, in the middle of non-renewals, and also the hiring season. What do we have? What do we need? You're also going to be in the middle of the recruiting because if you have vacancies right now, you better be the chief, not only the chief operator and the chief leader, but you also better be your chief recruiter. And how do we get ourselves plugged into some of these universities and schools and get the best stars to get into education and not lose them to another system? And so I think that it's important that you build those relationships early on. You pay attention, you listen. There'll be a little bit of sleep in there, but there's not going to be a lot. But I would also say in the first 100 days, you're going to know real quick that if somebody can be the leader or if somebody's going to be scared of all the things that are going to be thrown at them.
Do you have tenure in your district?
We do have tenure, yes, sir.
Do you have tenure?
No, sir. I've been an administrator for 16 years. I was born on that you are never tenured as an administrator, and I'm okay in my own skin never having tenure.
Thank you. Only one quick last thing, just a lot you hear from people. I just want to ask the question, what is Dickson County? What is this job to you? Is this job something you want to sit in, hang out for a long, long time? Is this job a stepping stone to a higher up job somewhere else?
Always a great question, because I would suggest to you, I'm in the director of schools role right now. The only opportunities for me to advance further are either getting into a big system or becoming the commissioner of education. I have no desire to ever work for the Tennessee Department of Education. And if you know, because I've been in Tennessee now 24 years, in education, 21 of those, they're not often hiring people from Tennessee. Most of that State Department is outsiders, not from the state of Tennessee, so I probably wouldn't have a shot anyways. But I really have never had a drive to be the leader of education for an entire state. Don't have that drive. I would suggest to you that this was a huge step for me to even apply for this position, because you talk about a $6 million budget, $6.5 million budget to, almost $87 million budget. This is a huge step. You're the 23rd largest school district in the state of Tennessee. You carry weight in Nashville. You carry weight with those big school districts, and that's something to be said, because I feel like that in this case, size does matter. All right. And sometimes some of those things that they're trying or experiencing or talking about in education come from some of those larger districts. And so do I see this as a stepping stone? I'll be real honest. I didn't see, for all those that are watching, I didn't see my first stop being a stepping stone. Okay. They've taken me in. Trust me. I know people have called my community. I hear about it every day. And that's why if you don't say Dr. H, they may not respond to you, because that's the only thing they know me as. But I would suggest to you that I didn't intend on, I don't want anybody to ever think that that's a stepping stone. This was an opportunity that people believed into me. All my mentors chose to surround myself with, believed that I had the capabilities of leading a larger district. And so I put my name forth on that opportunity. And so, like I said, I've been in Tennessee since 2000. My dad moved every 3 years. So I think I've showed that Tennessee is my home. Tennessee is where my kids will graduate high school. And now where they go to college, that's up to them, on that. But I do think Tennessee is one of the greatest states in the entire United States.
Well, thank you for coming back for the second interview, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
You got the power to stop me,
We hear a lot about things being based on data driven for decisions. Do you think there are other factors that need to be used to evaluate teachers and students and whether or not they're successful?
I do. Yes, ma'am. I think that data, it will tell a story on that, but teachers should not be solely evaluated based on a test score. Teachers also, I don't feel like it's fair to them that if they got an A, B, C, D, or F recently with the grade card, should be solely evaluated on that. I think it starts with the leader. And I would tell you that if you have the best leader in each of your schools, then 80% of the director's job is already done. Teachers are going to follow the lead of the leader of that particular school, male or female. They're going to follow that. You've got to have the best leaders as your principals and assistant principals. Again, when I was an elementary principal, I always hired somebody because my assistant principals always got pulled to be the next principals of an elementary. I took that as a compliment. They weren't leaving to go to something lower. They were always becoming a principal of another elementary school. I took that as a compliment. So each time, I had to hire 3 assistant principals. And I only had one, but I had to hire them 3 times. And I would always suggest to you that I hired somebody who was way smarter than me, because you talk about elementary curriculum. I was a middle school teacher. Everything we built, we blew up. Kids love me. And that's why I'm okay with some of those children who struggle with sitting in a class for 45 minutes or an hour having to learn reading or math. I was a problem-based learning classroom where we had a problem. We would build it, we'd blow it up. Kids loved my class. All right. So I think that data, when you talk about that, I'm looking for teachers who are inspiring children to go out and be better than that little boy or that little girl ever thought they could be, no matter what age. Those high school kids are still babies. They're just in bigger bodies. They still want love, support, discipline. They still need all those things those little babies need that are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And our teachers, in most cases, are in a parental role because they have to be that role model, because for some of our kids, they don't have that.
I'm assuming you wouldn't sing a snow day message to the kids if you can't sing.
Well, all I would say is that I just appreciate this opportunity to be able to follow up. Again, last time I was here, y'all were out of school for six days, because one of those was a holiday. And like I said, good luck to Dickson County. Dr. McCord has a tough decision whether she's going to have school or not. I'm not in the authority place to be able to call your school district off at the moment, nor would I do that. The weather looks favorable. It might be chilly out there, but you all have a tough task ahead of you all. Pray for each of you all, because you all, this process is not done. Still, I know you all want this to be done, but there's still a lot of conversations, and you have 2 more candidates who are very worthy of this position as well. And I wish you the best as you try to make those decisions and filter through that information. Thank you again for the opportunity to come and speak before you, and to speak before. I don't think this is maybe the first time I ever spoke in front of TV. It's changed the dynamic a little bit because people find you on that, but they also pay attention to you all too, because I hear that too on that. And so it's been a blessing and an opportunity to be able to come before you. And I just thank you for this opportunity.
Right now, we're going to take a little break.
We'll take a minute break until Dr. Duke gets up here. So.
back. A few questions, some general questions, and maybe a little bit more specific. What are your thoughts on the universal use of vouchers in Tennessee public education and how they impact public education?
As a public school guy, I do not like the vouchers. I think if we're having issues that will require somebody to want to leave, then we need to address those issues. That to me is, we're going to get a quality education in Dickson County schools. I firmly believe that our teachers here are as good or better than what you're going to get anywhere outside of this county, especially if we're talking about vouchers in a private education. I also see vouchers as a way of segregating. I think we're going to get a little more well-rounded around a well-rounded education in a public school setting than you would a private school setting. So I don't like the voucher system. I don't like the fact that it takes funds away from us. That's kind of a big thing as well. I mean, we're going to take funds from the students here to give them to somebody else to get an opportunity to go to a private school that wouldn't, maybe they weren't going beforehand, but now that's taking additional funds away from us that we could put forth to other avenues to help us out. So.
All right. Thank you, sir. What are your thoughts on the state of Tennessee's adoption and implementation of the third grade retention law?
I definitely don't. You're asking two things right here that I'm not really in agreement with. The third grade voucher or third grade retention law, to me, just is a way of punishing students. Again, if we're having an issue with our students in third grade that aren't meeting the requirements to read, then we need to look at other avenues as opposed to holding them back. Earlier intervention, if that's what's needed, earlier practices to help those students that are struggling to become more efficient at reading, as opposed to, hey, well, let's hold you back in third grade. I think when you get on top of that as well, I mean, we're putting a lot of pressure on a student, an 8-year-old student at that, to pass a reading exam, a one-day reading exam, to go to the next grade. Who knows what happened at that child's home the night before the test? That in and of itself is could impact whether they pass or fail. They had a bad night, didn't get much sleep, come in cranky. They're not looking at a test at that point. So to me, it's kind of like our testing system. We're putting our students in a testing spot all the time. We need to really look at it and evaluate the children themselves, like what's best for them at times. And they might not be getting up the next morning after a long night of whatever at the house to take a test.
All right. Thank you, sir. What are your thoughts on the use of behavioral support specialists in schools and their roles? And what do you see the roles as? And how would you ensure that they're in every school?
So behavior support specialist is kind of a new term, I guess, as far as like what we're doing with them functionally in the school system here in Dickson. It's been a great asset for us to learn how to handle difficult students in the classroom and what we need to do with that. It sounds great to have all this stuff in place. And we're adding jobs, not only, first off, we're adding techniques to the teachers that, another tool in their box that they can use to help with these students. But there's got to be some follow through with it. We can't just have the teacher doing all these, giving them tool and tool and tool without holding the child a little bit accountable for their behavior in the classroom over time. That becomes another step that we're looking at is like who is responsible for following through with those. So the behavior specialist actually helps with that aspect, gives us a chance to check in with that child. If we have one in the school, and right now, I don't think we have one per se per school. what we did at Burns Middle School was actually name one of our assistants over that who had a great relationships with those children that are usually typically in trouble. So what we did with her, she met with them almost daily. You know, if it was at lunch or whatnot, she would swing by and talk to them just to encourage them to keep going, which was a big asset. I mean, it's one thing to tell a child, hey, you need to act right in the classroom. All right. Now, we've got somebody following through asking them, what did you do in class today? And they would tell them a scenario and she would, reply back with a proper way or, next time you may want to handle it this way, a little bit different. So having those in the school is a great benefit to have. And hopefully we can find somebody in the school, whether it be an assistant or a teacher or somebody to develop those bonds with those children.
Thanks, sir. There have been questions. Your resume reflects that you were at Creekwood High School. You were the principal there. Explain to the board why you ended up departing Creekwood High School.
That was a hard one. I don't know if any of y'all were on the board at that time. That last graduation was probably the hardest time I've had to speak at all. Holding back tears of leaving something that I saw. Janie Jones started the venture over there, and then I kind of helped continue to build that school. It was hard to step down. When I would look at my 2-year-old and 4-year-old, I'm spending my time at school and not watching them grow up. I had to make a decision, a family decision. It was a tough one. But I, felt like that my kids needed me, my family needed me, my wife needed me. I mean, she was full-time caregiver for the kids, and I was the full-time principal at Dickson County High School. So, if kids had to get somewhere, doctor's appointment, ride to wherever, daycare, school, she was responsible for that because I couldn't do it. Most of the time those took place during school hours. So I stepped down from Creekwood High School mainly and fully for my family to kind of help move those guys or get some time with them. So,
all right, thank you for that. Let me ask you, how would you handle hiring your staff? Would you keep everyone in place, or would you make all your administrators reapply? How would you handle generally?
Are you talking about his central office?
Yes, sir. Central office.
Right now, I don't think we would have time to even look at having people reapply for this position. Number one, that's going to take a lot of time. Number two, it's January right now, but this position is not going to be filled until February. So transition times between that, I mean, to come in and start trying to have everybody in here reapply would be wouldn't be a good thing. We've got to move forward at this time. Coming from inside the county too, I don't see a lot of issues as far as glaring issues that, hey, we need to get rid of this person, or you may want to look at trying to add somebody here at this time. But I see it as coming in. If we've got issues, then we can address those as they arise. Conversations with that person in particular about, expectations, but I don't see any problem with any of the people that we have down here at this time.
Okay. Let me ask you the last question. What major changes would you implement to improve the Dickson County school system?
I think a combination of things. Let's take Dickson County, for instance. I've come up there, and the majority of the things that we're looking at, I'm not changing. One thing that we have implemented is a program called Move to Stand. It is a leadership class for our students. It's not going to be for every student. We're taking a collection of freshmen and sophomores this year. Next year, it'll be freshmen. And then, each year it'll be a freshman group that comes through that program, about 100 students each year. What we'll address is what leadership things can they bring to the campus. We've got great students in this, in the county. So, that changes the culture once they learn how to use their leadership in a proper way. So we're just going to kind of coach that with them. Address issues in the bathroom that maybe a teacher's not standing in there and we've got a fight that's fixing to start. How do you handle that? We've taught them how to handle that situation. They're going to take one of the kids, one of the ones that want to get in a fight, get them out in the hallway, get them down the hallway so we prevent that fight, which in turn prevents suspensions from school, possibly a chance for somebody at that point to talk with both of them and get their differences figured out before they turn to a fight to answer their questions, I guess. That's one example of something I would like to see as a major change. The only other big major change that I could see, and again, this is going to be dependent on a lot of things that I may not be privy to at this time. I'd like to see an athletic director over our athletics. We've got athletic directors in all of our schools that have athletics at this point, but I think when that started, we're talking about having football, basketball, and baseball, maybe softball. Since we've got 22 sports at the high school level, we got 14 or so at the middle school level, making sure we have coaches, staffs that are current with all the stuff that they need as far as TSSAA or TMSAA, making sure their trips are aligned the right way, making sure they're following their rules, making sure that like athletic fields are in proper use or, all of that stuff. So having somebody down here to coordinate that and follow through with it. It's one thing for us to say, hey, we're going to have this with our athletics, but it's something else to have somebody to follow through with that, especially with a number of an increase in athletics and athletic events that we have.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Mhm.
Dr. Duke, thanks for coming back tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Got 4 or 5 questions for you. First being, what do you think will be your greatest challenge working as a director of schools?
My biggest challenge is going to be to bring everybody together. Right now I see our school board, our leadership down here, our commission, what looks to be from the outside, at least, not on the same page. Getting the mayor involved with what we have as well, to ensure that like we're all on the same page to move forward. So the biggest avenue that I see is getting that unity together as well as a focus and not just, shoot from the hip to find out what we need to do next. Building programs, what do we need to do? All right. Again, I think I talked a little bit last time. It's like, you can tell me no, but we're going to find a way around it. It may not necessarily be a new, take Charlotte, for instance. It may not be a new Charlotte building. Maybe we look at how can we renovate Charlotte Middle? How can we renovate Dickson County High School? How can we get all of these things taken care of to make the schools better? Again, I think that's going to be my biggest challenge that I see stepping up to this position.
What strategies would you use to attract and retain high quality teachers?
Again, it's relationships. It's being out. It's talking to these guys as they leave, here. We graduate somewhere around 600 kids each year. So it would mean a lot to those guys to see the director of schools come back and say, hey, you know what? We'd love to see you back in our school system teaching again in 4 years. It's talking to the staff, developing relationships with those guys. We've had a bunch leave, I know a bunch of them. So, I'm going to have chats with them too. What can we do to get you back? What do you need? It's not necessarily that I'm going to be able to get them anything else that they want. They may want more money. We may not be in a spot where we can do that. But I can tell you now that I have your back, and I want you here. We would love to have you back in your home, your hometown or where you've been at and educated for years. We would love to have you back. So it's those relationships that you have with those teachers that keep them around.
Are you familiar with the term zero-based budgeting?
Zero-based? No, sir, I'm not going to act like
It
that.
is. It's basically starting at instead of starting a budget with what you have last year, we're going to add to it. It would be starting off with a major category, having to re-justify a budget. Maybe not every year, but at different points through the budgeting process. Do you see any advantages of making or having the budget realigned to zero and justifying the dollar spent in a category as opposed to just giving last year's money?
I think so. I think you need to come back and reevaluate what you're doing at least periodically. And we may create a position that we thought was going to be great and it's not panning out. Sometimes that's the person, sometimes it's not. It's just the position itself is not needed. So coming back and really justifying what we have those for and debating those would be a great thing across the board, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Duke. You've been at both high schools. I've been at both high schools. And over the years, sometimes, what would you do? Well, I'll just put it this way. What would you do when you hear of the yanny stuff that goes on sometimes? We got more level 5 teachers than you, or whatever. I mean, again, being inside the system, like none of these others here on the board, how would you resolve that? You admitted it. I'm saying.
So again, I think it comes back to the relationships, and I know what you're talking about. So, we've got the mindset of I'm a competitor. I still compete. I've done competition, probably 2 or 3 competitions this past year. I love the feeling of sitting here saying I'm better than you, or I need to work on something to get to you, right? That drive with it. As far as the jawing back and forth, there are sometimes that's good. If it's motivating, it's all dependent on when you sit back and look at it. Is it being motivational for the other person, or is it being like a letdown and they're just got their shoulders slumped? Being able to see those things with it, factor in. The big thing is like getting these two together. So if I've got somebody that's a level 5 at Creekwood High School and we've got a level 1 at Dickson County High School, why aren't we trying to get those guys on the same page? Like, let's talk. Let's go visit their classroom. Let's get in and see what's going on. Try to develop a bond between those two. I can still be competitive and helpful at the same time. Well, so, I can show you, like, if you would come in and we work on power cleans together, right? I can show you techniques that will help you make you better. Now that's going to make me better now too, because if you're catching me, then I've got to do something different. I've got to get after it a little harder too, to keep raising my game up to be higher, if you want, if that side. So, again, it's building relationships, helping those guys build relationships with each other and trying to get them together. I think we can accomplish that.
And what would you do to cement the relationship between central office people and the board? I know a lot of times it's been kind of like us against them, the board against office, the office against the board. I mean, it's how would you help bring the board and central office together? I mean, we're not out to get you.
Yes, sir.
Or anybody else but we just we wonder sometimes why things are done. Well, I can't wonder except for 2 years, but anyway.
No, and that's kind of, as a liaison between the two, I would say this would be part of my job description, keeping you abreast of what's going on and keeping everybody abreast, having you guys come in and talk to them. Again, you all may have a different view than me, and we may have y'all may have a better idea than we have. So sitting here and pitting each other against one another is not a good thing to do. Communicating, talking, keeping you filled in on what we're looking at, all of that stuff, and it comes down to relationships between the two. I'm not going to ask y'all come join a pizza party or anything like that, unless that's what y'all feel like would be, something that we need. But we definitely need to be talking, communicating amongst each other, to find the best thing. Because I think at the end of the day, all of us are here to make the educational system at Dickson County better. And, if we're all on different pages, and it may just be a miscommunication. It may be one word that we thought we heard that we didn't. clarification and being able to talk amongst each other will be big things that I see that we need to do and get better at as a group. I think both sides can be better at that, and I think both sides can learn to do that.
And there's a lot of concern lately about a lot of materials found in libraries. It's not age appropriate. I know when you start pulling books, that's not a good thing. But do you think that there's materials in the libraries that kids have access to that is not age appropriate?
Do I think that? I hope not. I've seen a few books that are probably not appropriate for the school level. Yes. And as a principal, once we see that, I'm communicating with my librarian if we see something like that, because when you get a ton of books in, we opened up Burns Middle School. There's no way that anybody could know every title that went in. I mean, they all came in boxes. Did we check them in? Yeah. But when you're checking in 1,000+ books, it's hard to tell exactly what's in each one of them. I know we don't have time to read them all either. So as we have books that come across, there may be, I think I pulled a couple when I was at Creekwood. I pulled a couple, when we were at Burns, that I didn't think was appropriate. Content wasn't good for, what we're just not good. On the other hand, too, we also need to look at, not everybody has the same viewpoints we have on everything. So it's not that necessarily we need to pull every book that we've got. But there are some that probably are questionable in what they're putting across that need to be taken care of.
Okay.
Thank you again, Mr. Duke, for coming in and sharing this time with us.
Yes, sir.
I knew you didn't have anything better to do.
That's okay. Well, we're playing Henry County on the Hill this morning.
Spend some time with us.
Yeah.
Do you believe that there's a correlation between the success of students and the increased level of parents' engagement in the school district?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
I sure can. Do you believe there's a correlation between the success of students and the increased level of parent engagement in the school systems?
Of course.
How so?
Anytime, I talk about this routinely. In my mind, my children are better off, not than everybody. Don't think
Sure.
that I'm saying it that way, but they're better off than, somebody that is not as well off as we are. And I say that because my children have books at home. My children were given opportunities to go places that, in Nashville or, Florida or wherever, to go visit museums that other children don't get the opportunity. Do you have to have that to be successful? No. If your parent is involved with that, they can get more material for you. They can help lead the way with that. So having parents involved is a great thing because that shows some invested interest that they want their child to be better. Hey, that's what we want. So if they're doing it and we're doing it too, we're going to be better off. So I think there's a big correlation between that.
What role do you think discipline plays in creating the right academic learning environment for all students?
Discipline's the key. And when I talk about discipline, I'm not talking about like the old school paddling and stuff like that. I'm talking about discipline, from teaching the kids the discipline of not necessarily jumping for what they see as best right now, to be able to sit back and drive themselves to be better down the road. I know that the time commitment to read this book is going to take away from me playing a video game, per se. But if I do that, I become smarter. I learn something out of there that I wouldn't learn on the video game. That, to me, is discipline as well. I'm assuming you're talking about as far as classroom procedure, hey, we're not following classroom procedures. Well, that's the same way I look at that too. It's not necessarily that we're chopping fingers off, but we need to learn how to sit in the classroom. We need to learn how to deal with that stuff, not necessarily for the time being, but for the long haul too, so that you become a better student across the board. So I think discipline is key. I think discipline has been put on the back burner sometimes for not only classroom disruptions and stuff like that because we got so much material. But like these tests, they're pushing our discipline out right now. I think that if we look at discipline in different terms of what than just you're in and out of class as much and start looking at it as the long-term effect of that, we're going to be better. So that means that like if we learn how to function in the classroom the right way, the discipline behind that will make us better students, which means that we'll be able to learn more. So
Do you think teaching that at an early age or a lower grade level will help as they come up through our system?
yes, sir. I think that, and of course, you want that. That's what you ultimately want. Like we as kindergartners, this is what we learn, and we learn that discipline procedures all the way through. But we also have to reinforce that. Sometimes that stinks as the principal or assistant principal that has to, strike a discipline out on somebody for making a mistake. But we're holding you accountable for that. We want you to make sure that you're doing those things. So it's the same thing, class period ISS is failing a class to me. I mean, we just didn't have the discipline in the class. You personally didn't have the discipline to study outside of the class hours. So, we've got to hold them accountable for that. And that's to me, the key. So I think it's ongoing and it kind of is reinforced as we go through, but it starts early.
All right, let me ask you a question about your administration. If you were to get the job, I believe that developing the right culture of an organization starts at the top. So how would you go about developing a culture where all the employees felt valued, seen, and heard?
And heard. All right. So kind of the first thing I'm going to do is probably talk to them all. I told you last time I was going down to Barry to give a speech. And the speech that I gave was about, we started off with some rubber bands. I didn't bring my rubber bands, so bear with me. Right. So, as we got one rubber band, I can pull that apart and break it very easily. Just like anybody else, if we're having somebody jawing in somebody's ear outside and or spreading rumors or whatever, it's easy for that one person to break away so they can get those guys out. On the other side, when we're all together and you've got a handful of rubber bands, you can't get those things stretched apart. So the purpose of that rubber band exercise is to show people that, as we're together, that's going to make us a lot stronger than it would be if we're separate. So we've got to work as one. If we don't, we're destined to break apart. Valued, again, we talked quite a bit last time about leadership teams, bringing certain, teachers from all the schools together to talk about, what would be better for them, what's going to help them with these things. That increases the value of not only that person in particular, but they're talking to the people at their campus and bringing ideas with them when they come talk. So again, I'm not going to profess to be the smartest guy in the room, but I will say that if we come together as one, we can actually make a better product. So when you do that, you get those valued, seen, and heard characteristics to the people in the school system. That to me is what I'm going to be doing, is trying to get everybody together on the same page. I expect, because I am the guy up top, that my administration underneath me is doing the same. Again, at expectation, and I'm following through with those. But being seen out in the school makes a big difference too. So having that open door policy to allow people to come in and chat with me, or hey, I'm walking down the hall at Bentley Elementary and somebody has a question for me, and I stop and ask and talk with them for a little while and answer their question.
In your mind, what is the primary role of a school director and what is their responsibilities?
So my primary role is leading the school system, leading up and down and sideways, or however you want to call it. it's going to be not necessarily that I'm going to be telling you guys what to do, but we're going to be working together to figure out what we need to do to make the school system better. It's going to be working with the commissioners, the mayor, to make sure that we're, everybody is on the same page. Making sure that our staff is following through with what they're supposed to do as far as administrators here in this building, and then making sure that that's actually getting executed out in the schools. So, traveling around a lot, making sure that things are getting taken care of all the way down to the school level. That's what I want to see. And that's what I think my job would be.
Let me give you a quick yes or no answer. Are you familiar with Title 49?
Let me put it this way. I think I know what you're talking about, but I'm not 100% sure of the
Okay.
number.
Okay. When have you been glad to listen to an authority figure?
Glad to listen to an authority figure. I'll be honest with you. I feel like I'm glad every time I talk to them. Now, on the other end, depending on where we're at, I'm going to speak my mind, right? There are places to speak. I say glad because I like to learn. And a lot of times the authority figure has something to add value to my life. There are times though, that they may be coming to me talking about something that I don't think that will be in the best interest too. And I'm going to speak my mind with that.
That it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The difference between a boss and a leader?
Yes, sir.
Please expound on that.
A boss sits around and barks orders. A leader actually gets out there and gets his hands dirty. So, not necessarily that I'm maybe teaching math, but I'm there for that person. I'm not just barking orders at them. What can I do to help them? Again, math's not my forte, for instance, of teaching. But I definitely can put value to that person as a leader without just barking orders that we've got to make better test scores. Getting in there with them, finding out what it is, helping them think of ideas to help themselves out. Those are things that I see as a leader, and that I hope that, am I going to be able to do that with everybody? No, but I hope that we set that environment around for our staff here in the central office that leaks down to the principals, that leaks all the way down to the teachers, of that leadership and not boss.
Thank you.
Mr. Duke, thank you for coming back for another interview.
Thank you.
My questions kind of got touched on by most all these guys right here. So I know you done said how you feel about discipline. So how do you feel about the use of an alternative school like our NDA? How do you feel about NDA being more of an umbrella style school than just a punishment school? And then what ages do you think are appropriate to go to NDA?
So we'll start with the end one there, the end question that you had. I think that NDA should be open K through 12. Again, I don't see it as a punitive thing like this, punishment only. I think that we need to have it more as an umbrella school than we have right now. I think it needs to offer a lot of alternatives. Hence the alternative. There are people that would benefit from that. We used to have a high school, like a 17-year-old GED or high school equivalent program at our New Directions Academy. We had a couple other virtual high schools and things of that nature that helped what they call a SOC, a school of choice. I think there are students that come through. Of course, you hear NDA and you're thinking punitive, like this is pure for punishment. There were a significant amount of students that chose that as their school that they wanted to go to, not because they thought it was easier. They saw that it allowed them to function better. I don't say stricter, but like there were lower class sizes. The way they walked in the hallway was a little different than what you would have at the high school. There was as much freedom I guess, I don't know how to say it, like you just couldn't walk willy-nilly everywhere. So they got different areas that they had to walk. So, I see our alternative school, our New Directions Academy, being needed a lot more than it's being utilized as of right now.
Thank you for that. In the first interview, Miss Brogdon asked you what your strengths were, and I'd like to ask you, what is your weakness?
Curriculum. I'm not even going to try to hide it. As a high school principal, when you look out and you see, all right, we got math and English, all right, those are intimidating enough, and I can get through those. Science, I can get through some of those. You start talking about biology, I got that. When you get into chemistry, man, some of that higher level math, I have no idea. And then you get into auto mechanics. Good grief, I have no idea what's going on out there. So I have to rely on those guys. So, it is a weakness of mine, the curriculum part of it, because there's such a variety of things. I mean, we can be a curriculum. When we talk PE, I can hold my own, right? Or we talk weight training, I got you. Nutrition, no problem. But when we start talking about some of the calculus classes, have I done calculus? We had to do calculus. We've had to figure out like what the speed and velocity and all that stuff is for muscle output. But when you start talking about just a calculus class in and of itself, that's way over my head. And I don't know that there are probably anybody that could come in and say they're a content expert or curriculum expert all the way through with everything that we offer. I mean, we didn't hit FFA, we didn't hit business, we didn't hit, a lot of the offerings that we have. So, that to me is my biggest weakness. But I'm aware of that. So I know walking in, I'm not the content expert, but I can help you get better in your classroom, regardless of what you're teaching.
What do you think about a child when the data says that child should not be graduated to the next grade level, when they fail their class? I'm not talking about state tests, but when they fail their classroom is an F and they should be retained. What do you feel about retaining that child?
I think there's a lot of factors that go into that. Who the educator is, most of the time I'm going to rely on that educator to tell me what they think. Do they know the material at all? Is it that lack of, doing homework? What's their home life like? If they can start answering those questions and it's like, hey, they got a good home life, they're just not doing anything in here, right? I got no problem not giving you a grade in there, a failing grade. We got a kid that has a horrible home life. We're doing great to get to school, and he doesn't have his homework done, and he failed because he didn't do his homework. He knows the material, like he's done well on the test, but your we're looking at it and you failed class because you haven't done your homework all year. That's a little bit different too. So you see what I mean? I think at that point it becomes a conversation with that teacher. Like, why are we doing it this way? What are we doing? Are there exceptions to those rules? The kids that just don't come in and do anything? And yeah, there are. I think, if we've given every effort that we can do, not only that, we've kept up with it from the start. We put them in tutoring. We put them in like extra time where they can get work done and they're still not getting it done. I think there comes a time and a point where we got to say, we've given everything we can. You've given nothing. Then you need to be retained.
Your first 100 days as director is going to end up being somewhere in the middle of the summer. If you were elected as director, what would you plan on accomplishing in your first 100 days?
You got some good questions tonight. First 100 days, hopefully, come in and we start seeing some unity across the board. We start seeing some unity and direction, and trying to find out a way, a path that we need to go. I hope that stuff is in the making and in the process at that 100-day mark. I hope that at the 100-day mark, we're ready for the next school year. I don't have any doubt in my mind that we're not ready right now. But if we're trying to get ready sometime in June and July for next school year, we're way behind. So I hope that, as I come in, I see that everybody's ready to go. that we were able to start on August the 1st with a full go and not have any reservations. So, those two things right there to me, hopefully that, like I said, the second one of being ready to go is pretty much taken care of. I feel like it will be. But I think the unity part, seeing some unity, start seeing some stuff where we're working together on things is going to be my biggest goal.
Do you have tenure with our district?
I do. Yes, sir.
Are you willing to give that up in your director's contract?
Tenure. Yes, sir. Because I have no doubt in my ability. I would say yes. And that's a big thing because I got the old school tenure, like that old tenure.
That 2011 tenure.
Yeah, that you couldn't fire me kind of tenure.
Yeah.
And to sit here and say that, yes, sir, I believe in my ability to do something. I'm not going to halfway do it. So I'm not scared of that.
And would this be the top of the stepping stone, or would this be a stepping stone for another part of your career later on? This
is it for me. I've been offered jobs in other counties. I've been offered to come over and do these things. And it's like, that's not in what I want to do. This to me is the biggest job that, being from Dickson County, I started out elementary school over in Charlotte, went to Charlotte Junior High, Dickson County High School. This is, to me, is the biggest job that I could do as an educator to give back to this community. And that's what I want to do. And to me, that's the top part. That's not saying that I'm going to get up there and be like satisfied and put feet up on the desk by any means. But that's the top job that I'm looking for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I yield my time, Ms. Brogdon.
We hear a lot about data-driven decisions. Do you think other factors need to be used in evaluating if a teacher or a student successful? What would it be?
Yes. I don't think you can pigeonhole somebody into one form of like a test for data. And then you look at it too, having gotten my doctorate, I know I can take data and I can kind of form it around a little bit to make it look, not that it's different, not that it answers the question, but I can take it and kind of shade it over to one side a little bit. I don't think test data in and of itself names anything other than how good they are at a test on that day that they took it. It does not answer from a teacher's perspective what they've done through the system or through the school year to get that school up and running, what they've done on the side with that, the relationships that they built or tried to build with parents. Again, if we look at it from a teacher standpoint, if that student had a bad night and didn't come in and test well, now we're putting all that on them for one day of testing. Students are in the same boat. Like I said, everybody has their strengths and weaknesses, and to sit here and, maybe that's their weakness is test taking, and to dictate their life and everything that we do around it based on a test is probably not the best for that child. To sit here and say that you're an awful student, or they hear these words of like, you're not a good test taker. You hear all these negative things all the time, and it starts to ring through them, and not only just ring through them in the testing section, but also in life. I've seen people that are beat down from life, and that's definitely not something that I would want to test to weigh over them and say that you're awful because you can't test. That's just not something that I see as a positive. We need to be held for our data. I'm not saying that like we should just get a free pass. We're going to do our best every time. But if I look at somebody and I put them up the plate and they strike out, you know what? I'm going to come back and we're going to pump them back up. We're going to get in there and do it again. I don't want them to be gun shy or not want to do that again. So I hope that answered.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I thank you for being here. I don't have any follow-up.
We got one off the record.
Yes, sir.
tell your grandma that I appreciate her calling me.
Well.
And I think a lot of her calling me, telling me how good her grandson is. I thought that was great.
You know, yeah.
And you tell her that I appreciated that.
Well, you know, well, I will. I'll let her know. You know, that's the great thing about being from Dickson County. I mean, we got a lot of people around and pulling for us, you know, and they want to see us successful. So,
Tell her I said,
I will. I will.
She didn't call me.
She didn't call you? And I think she's in your district.
I mean, we're probably neighbors.
You want to know what she called me? Your grandma's highly respected in this town.
Well,
She's a
thank
great
you.
lady.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Y'all want to take a break? We're on our third interview and final one with Dr. Christy Southerland. We're going to go through and we're trying to keep it to like 10 minutes apiece. So, Mr. Vandervoort.
Thank you. Dr. Sloan, thank you for coming back and congratulations that you're here.
Well, thank you for
Yes.
having me.
So I have some general questions on topics and then maybe more some specific questions on your background.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on the universal use of vouchers in the Tennessee public, in Tennessee public education and how they impact public education?
Well, they will definitely impact public education. I know that there's more details to be worked out. When I worked for the State Department, I was privy to getting to go into schools in Nashville and schools across the state. In some of those areas, like Nashville, Shelbyville, I could see maybe where vouchers would be what parents would need in a large school district. For the rural districts, it would be devastating because we would lose some of our best students to our neighboring schools. And I think that would be devastating for Dickson. I know that by listening to state legislators, they are thinking about allowing students to cross borders, Hickman County students to come into Dickson County school systems. Waverly students could come and use their voucher in Dickson County. It hurts rural communities. And so we want to sustain our public education system. And we want to keep our good teachers here and our great students here. And we want to make sure that we have a system for all in Dickson. So I can see the benefits in our larger districts that may have some failing schools. But we have a great school system here, and I would not be opposed. We have students from Humphreys and Hickman. They come to school here. They pay tuition to come here, and we allow that. But I think vouchers have to be looked at very intentionally and with the right purpose.
Thank you. Second, what are your thoughts on the state of Tennessee's adoption and implementation of the third grade retention law?
Well, the third grade retention law is the law that when I was at the State Department that Candace McQueen started and then Penny Swin implemented. The reason behind that law was our state was falling behind with literacy with our students. One of the things that I think has been a positive, it's been making our system aware. Awareness is okay. It has also caused us to implement some really good programs. Also at the state level, one of the things that came out of the third grade retention law was the adoption of high quality instructional material. And through that adoption, it created more equity across the board in our schools, across the state, in our district, Dickson. So I think as a district, we have done a really good job of putting programs into place to help with our third graders. You were very instrumental as a board in hiring assistants to go into all of our third grade classrooms to help with that extra gap closure. We have started the United Way after school tutoring program that has helped with that gap closure. And we were one of the 87 districts in the state that implemented the Tennessee All-Core program, which we were a best for all district in implementing that helped with gap closure so that we would see the hard work when we had students that were in third grade be the recipients of the work so that our retention there was not a large number.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that answer. What are your thoughts on the use of behavioral teams or behavioral student support specialists? And what do you see in their roles in the schools being? And how would you ensure that they're in every school?
Okay. Well, I've gotten to see that firsthand here. One of the advantages I've gotten to work with Jessica Alberson very closely, and she helped lead the behavior specialist. I think they're pertinent as a leader. The well-being of students emotionally, physically, mentally is very important, not only to our students, but also to our staff and teachers. So in today's time, students come with various backgrounds, various experiences. And as a school system, we need to help support students on every level. So I am for specialists. I would like to see those specialists in our schools help to combat the needs of our children. So that, to me, having them helps to define the whole child, and we're about the whole child.
Thank you. I want to ask you more specific about parts of your resume. I noticed that you have served in a role as an assistant principal, but not as a principal.
Yes.
Tell me about that. Tell us about, have you had those opportunities or just chose not to, or you just decided to go do other things? I'm just
Yes.
asking generally about that.
Absolutely. Well, I was privileged enough to be asked to be an assistant principal of Dickson Middle School. I served in that capacity for several years under the direction of Mr. Johnny Chandler. Great team. I wanted to be principal of Dickson Middle School. It just wasn't my time. And then I had the opportunity to move up to the board level. And so I took that opportunity. And there I had the privilege of helping lead principals in the work. But as assistant principal, I got the opportunity to work with curriculum, behavior. When Mr. Chandler was out, I subbed in his stead. I did everything from behavior to curriculum to data. I was responsible for all of that. I was also responsible for ordering curriculum for our school and sending that budget here to the board office. When I was core director, I led professional developments with principals around the state, along with directors around the state. And my main focus was superintendents and principals in the Middle Tennessee area.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask, if you are hired in the role as director of schools, how would you handle hiring? How would you come in and clean house, or would you keep the current administration, the central office in place? How would you proceed?
Well, I would proceed in. I'm not coming in to make any definite changes. I think a good leader looks intentionally at the work and what is happening in the school currently. If there's changes to be made, I'm a person and a leader that can make changes, but I have been in this work. There are good things happening in this district. There are people working hard at the work, and I would not have any intentions on making any drastic moves coming into this position at this time.
Okay. And let me ask final question. What major changes would you implement to improve the Dickson County school system?
One of the things that I would like to see is an athletic director
Okay.
for our district. And I will say that we have hundreds of students participating in extracurricular events. And we want to keep that. I think that's a really great thing. My son plays football. We have lots of coaches. So I think an athletic director can help consistently talk about policy and procedures and protocols and keep things cohesive. I think that would be a position needed. I would like to see a recruiter coordinator that would take over the Grow Your Own program and would recruit within our colleges, go out and be the face of that, do social media. But teacher retention is what we need, and we need a dedicated person for specifically for teacher retention. And the Grow Your Own program, if we pass the budget, we will have 4 cohorts. And so that would take us up to almost 37 candidates. That's a large role for that could be combined with a recruiting coordinator, because we want to continue to grow people for our district with the specificities of what we see good teachers need to be and the expectations. So that would be one thing that I would like to look at. And then I think a assistant director of schools position would be critical to working with the director on policies, because we need to make sure that we are adhering to policy and procedures and standards. So very important roles.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dr. Sutherland, thanks for coming back tonight.
Hey, thank you for having me.
I'm going to get my questions out of order because one of them relates heavily to one of your last answers, and let you continue to build on that before I go a different direction. What strategies would you use to attract and retain high quality teachers?
Well, I think one of the things over the last 3 years, I've gotten the privilege to come to meetings here at the board. So one of the things that I have seen you do is value teachers and staff. And so we appreciate those bonuses. So I think we have to look at training our current teachers and making sure that we value them, because to me, word of mouth is your best advertisement. So teachers internally can help recruit others to come and teach in this district. So valuing who we have now, training them, sustaining our high performing teachers. When I speak to them, they want to be valued. They want to have training. So I think when we do that, we're going to help recruit new people to our district when we say, these are the things we're doing now to support who we have already in our district. I think we do have to look at teacher pay. And with the governor's proposal of getting pay for our new teachers for the year of 25-26 to $50,000, I think we're going to have to look at how we sustain those that have been with us for 5 years, 10 years, and on down the road, so that there is a sustainability. So training who we have to help be the boots on the ground that help us with recruiting people here. When people hear, I like teaching in Dickson, I like what they have to offer me, other teachers listened. So I think we need to get that right and make sure we're very supportive and value the teachers that are here with trainings, continue what you are doing as boards to do our teacher bonuses, but I do think that we do need to look at our teacher pay.
What do you think will be your greatest challenge working as a director of schools?
I think the greatest challenge, one of the things is I want the district to really know who we are and build relationships. I heard someone say that maybe they've lost faith and maybe they've lost faith in the public education system. I want to really recruit who we are as a system. I want to be a person that has engaged leadership. You know, I've always heard that leadership is not through windows. It's through floors and doors. So getting out there, being amongst our teachers and our staff, and really building relationships so that our community sees what we're all about. Really getting out there and talking to our community. I had mentioned in my my first interview, that I want this open door policy. I want to meet parents. I want to meet community leaders. I want to answer questions about our wonderful system. But I think engaged leadership and really starting to be innovative and taking those steps in that direction for our district. So I don't know if it will be challenging. I love the process. I think it's, I really want people to see the hard work that's going on here and the great teachers that we have teaching our students.
Can you share with us an example of a time when your authority has been challenged and how you handled that?
Yes. When I was secondary director here several years ago, I had a principal challenge what I wanted to do for ACT. And, you know, I had to think about that. And so one of the things I have to do is step back and put myself in their position as a leader. And so one of the things is we went on a school visit, and I let them see how another high school was creating large growth in their ACT. And so I wanted to listen to maybe why we couldn't get the schedule to work that way, or what are the needs that we wanted. But after we sat down and spoke, after we went on that school visit, I really got more buy-in in that instance, but wanted to push back at first on our schedules won't work with their initiative and how they are placing ACT in the schedule. And so after all of that, we implemented parts of what we saw at that high school, and we had some really good gains in ACT.
Thank you. Changing the director of schools seems to be quite an uncomfortable time for a lot of people, but mostly our educators. It is for our families also. And but from the educator standpoint, how will you get reluctant educators to follow your lead other than just ordering them to do so?
Well, one, I'm here to build relationships. If anyone knows me and my leadership, I'm about engaged leadership. I want to have an open door policy with our teachers. I know that each one of our schools had leadership teams. I would like to meet with those leadership teams and hear what they are saying that are the challenges and the strengths, not only of their school, but of what they view our larger system to be. So we have a large system, but then we have 16 mini systems within one system, and they all work differently because of their culture and because of who they are. So I would want to sit down with each of those leadership teams to have a voice and for them to share, again, their challenges and their strengths. But I want to build I'm not wanting to be a micromanager. I want to get out and see our people. I want our leadership team to be engaged and impactful. But I've said this before, our greatest asset are our teachers. And when we get the trainings that they need to even get better, the students are the recipients of that. So I think one thing they need to know, I'm their colleague. I just wear a different title. So I'm proud of being an educator, and I want them to know that I'm very transparent. I would be transparent with you, but I want to be transparent with them and hear their needs.
Thank you. Are you familiar with the term zero-based budgeting?
I am not.
Zero-based budgeting in a nutshell is re-justifying the budget by categories at certain intervals. It'd be almost impossible to do an entire budget in 1 year, but to take a category that the old principle of we have to spend this much and add to it every year versus re-justifying a budget in a nutshell. Do you see any advantages or disadvantages in using this budgetary process when we're doing budgeting?
Well, if I had to re-justify and reallocate, that would be something that I would be very transparent to a school board on a line item. I would have to look at that a little bit deeper to really give a straightforward answer.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
And that's it.
Thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
What would be your, how would you direct the relationship between the central office staff and the board? I've been here a long time, and I know sometimes from the central office to teachers, or from the board to teachers, sometimes there's this it's us versus them. I've experienced that a few times. How would you mellow the situation between the central office and the board, or the central office and
Okay. One of the things is I've had the privilege of being back here in the district now for 3 years. I've seen the hard work that's taking place in this office with qualified staff to do the work. I think we set the pace for the culture. I think teachers in central office, we have to reiterate what the relationship is with me and you as a board. And then the expectation of the culture is we're going to work together, because our business is students. Students are our business. And then how we communicate, how we collaborate, how we set the tone trickles down. But I am the one that models that as your employee. And I will model that from my employees at the central office and to the teachers. So it comes over how we have a trust with each other, how we build our relationship with each other. And that is what the expectation will be with me setting as directors of schools.
I expected to get, let me start with this. A lot of people told me that you're very personable outside of the classroom, outside of the school system. But from time to time, there are things that have come up that people have wondered about your motives and so forth. And please, I expect to get calls. And I've been reminded a lot that, I voted for you. I want you to vote for her, But then again, truly, and I'm not trying to make this a got you session, but there's a couple of things I would like for you to respond to.
Sure.
For instance, how do you respond to what programs do you cover?
What programs do I cover?
Yeah.
I currently cover Grow Your Own. I have 3 cohorts of that. I do the 10 all-core tutoring. I do United Way tutoring after school program. And I am over the new mentoring program for 0 years experience to 3 years of experience, depending on the direction of the administrators.
Did you, in the HR report,
Mr. Cabot, can I interrupt and to ask you to ask the same questions that you asked the others or close to it?
well, I still want to ask her this privately then. You mentioned the concern for students, and I'll just say this. My main concern is for the 7,676 students in our system and for the 1,086 full-time staff.
Yes.
That's my main focus here. So, again,
Do you have any other questions that you asked the other ones?
I will ask about the library materials.
Yes.
There's work, or there's a lot of boards that are picking books and so forth, and there are some books, and I have seen books in our libraries that are not age appropriate. What would you do about those?
Well, I think that has to follow a process. There is a process and a rubric that is sent down by the State Department. And I think that, first of all, as a district, we need to go by the process of the rubric on how books are selected within our libraries. We need to make sure that age appropriate and the content is looked at. Unfortunately, you can find criticism in almost everything that you read. So there is a fine line there, but I think with a process in place, that would behoove us to be making the decisions necessary that students will have in libraries. But I do think we have to follow a process. And that process may not be geared toward what Christy Southerland thinks, but the process is to be upheld and placed in the system. Because as a parent, there may be a book that I don't necessarily want my child to read, and that's my personal preference, but that may not offend another parent. But we need to be very cautious what we're putting before our children. But again, it goes with a process.
Miss Southerland,
Yes.
I've read through your resume several times, and I've looked through your references, and you've given us letters of recommendations. Mr. Chandler talks pretty highly of you, and as does the Tullahoma Director of Schools and the Murfreesboro Director of Schools, and Miss Fox at the Department of Transportation, but the Department of Education.
Yes.
So very impressive, and I appreciate you coming and allowing us to hear more from you and what your thoughts are. So
Thank
that
you.
being said, do you believe that there's a correlation between the success of students and the increased levels of parental engagement in the school district?
Absolutely.
What role do you think discipline plays in creating the right academic learning environment for students?
Well, parents can be the greatest asset to children's success. I think one of the things we always want to make our parents feel welcome in our facilities.
Mm-hmm.
We want to encourage parents to ask questions and to have a voice. We want to have friendly cultures, environments when they come into our schools. I want them to feel welcome. I want them to be inviting. I think parents can be our greatest asset when we talk about attendance. You know, one thing that we push in the school programs that I am over is a 90% attendance. rate, and we need parents to help support that because we want our students engaged and being in school. So I think parents are key to success for their students, but they can also be our community liaison that talks about how wonderful our schools are. So we want to value our parents because we want them to trust us and we want them to value our system so they put their greatest asset in our schools.
Developing the right culture in an organization, I think, as you alluded to, starts at the top.
It does.
And so my question is, how would you go about developing a culture where employees felt valued, felt like they are seen, felt like they are heard? How would you, what do you think is the best way to go about doing that?
Well, I feel that everything begins and ends with leadership. So one of the things as director is I need to model that. I need to model that for my team, district level team. I need to model that for teachers, and I need to model that for students. So building a culture of engaged leadership, getting out in schools. I said earlier, you can't see what's happening if you're sitting behind a window. You have to open the doors and step on the floors and get out in our schools. So having that culture of trust with our teachers, meeting with leadership teams, allowing them to have a voice. I like surveys. I would like to have surveys on how our leadership team is doing, of how we're supporting you, even down to our parents giving and allowing them to have surveys on our leadership. We're about servant leadership. My leadership style is being a servant leader and a visionary leader. I combine those, but I'm a leader that rolls up the sleeves and I get down in the work, and I'm not going to ask you to do anything I wouldn't do myself. So I want to be personable. I want to be out in the schools. I want to ask teachers questions. What are the challenges? What are their needs? How do we get better as a system? So I think there's, just building that relationship and knowing that if they're telling me something challenging or something that they think that I would think is negative, I don't want it to be punitive because I want to grow in this seat. I'm not finished growing yet professionally. I don't have all the answers, and I want to make sure that everyone understands I don't have all the answers. I'm here to learn. It's a reciprocal learning. We're learning together to move this district in the right direction.
This is a pretty big district. When it comes to our county, we're soaking up half the funds. And so with you at the helm or any other director at the helm, it's a big vehicle, Tell me the difference between a leader and a boss.
Well, a boss is going to be more telling, more micromanaging. A leader is going to love their people, and they're going to be servant leaders. They're going to be out in the field. They're going to be amongst in the Army, you would call them troops. I say boots on the ground, but I need to be engaging. I need to engage with my leadership team. I need to set the tone for who we are and what the expectations are. But I have to live it and model it. So leaders are in the work in trenches. Bosses, they're the ones looking out the window that I've alluded to.
You mentioned that we all make mistakes, and we're of course still growing in our roles, and then that's probably the case until we die. But have you ever tell me about a time as a leader that you've experienced a failure, and what did you do to recover from that?
Well, let me think about that. I have made decisions that I have learned from. And one of the decisions was hiring a teacher that constantly wanted to push back with any authority. Even if you tried to support and help, they didn't need it. One of the things that I did was, just went and just said, what is going on? Help me understand why you're negative. Do you not like being here? How can I support you more? Really, that person made me grow as a leader. I think more than what I gave her from a leader to a teacher. But when all things were said and done, it was, when I really listened, it was over a dress code. And it was where holes at the time that I was at Dickson Middle, holes were not allowed. And so we made this announcement. And so there were 30 students standing outside my office from her room. And she had made them put tape all over their pants with minute holes. But after we worked out the conversation, I sent all of those students back. I was regretting right there personally, really going to bat to hire her. But then I thought, you're a really good teacher. Let's talk through this. And she ended up staying at Dickson Middle. We are friends today. And so I regretted it for a moment, but then I realized that pushed me to be a better listener, and that everyone's perception is not the same as mine. So that's one instance. I'm sure there's many others that people could say that I have failed at. But that is one that I hope I did. I would hope if you had the conversation with that teacher that it wasn't a failure.
That's all I have for you. I want to thank you for your honesty in that
You're
last. I know that you were kind of vulnerable there, and I appreciate your honesty.
You're both.
Thank you for coming, Ms. Christie.
Hey, thank you.
Oh, you have tenure with us.
Yeah, I think I do.
Would you be willing to give that tenure up in your director's contract?
Absolutely.
Explain how you feel about discipline and the use of our alternative school, NDA. And how do you feel about NDA being more of an umbrella school, not just a disciplinary sentence? And at what ages do you feel are appropriate for NDA?
Okay. Well, I've had experience as a secondary director when NDA was a K-12 school. I saw its benefits, but I think all schools should have a purpose. And so with NDA, there are specific purposes that we use that and utilize that school. So if you're asking, would I be opposed to having an NDA for students of K through 12? I would not. But I would want it to be very specific and purposeful for the students that we would send there. I think that school I would want a state-of-the-art alternative facility, because we want to make sure that we address the whole child's needs. And just by sending them to a school may alleviate one thing, but did we support the students in the right work, in the right way with that school? So there are schools doing that work well around the state. And so one of the things that I would do would be to take people from our leadership team, and we would go out to the schools that are doing that work with alternative facilities well. We would look at that, we would study that, and then we would bring back best practices. I would take the principal of the alternative facility, because she would be or he would be leading that work. And so we would all need to be on the same page, but intentionality is the key. purposeful is the key. We don't want to grow gaps there. We want to make sure that our students are very successful in that setting. And we want to make sure that we have good counselors there. We have good curriculum set there so that our students aren't falling behind. We need to address behavior, because when you go to an alternative facility, controlling the behavior becomes the priority. And so we're going to have to look to make sure that we have the right people on the staff in the right work there. So I would not be opposed to opening up our alternative school K through 12, but I would want it to be a school that if students are put back into their regular school, that they are successful, they're not behind. But if they wanted to stay there until they graduated because they have anxiety or the behavior would continue, that we would do that as well, and we would support that student.
So we somehow we'd have to help make it a choice school, and then in some way, and then staff the school to get to that point. Thank you for that. In the first interview, Ms. Brogdon asked about what you thought your strengths were. I want to ask, what is your weakness?
My weakness is trying to do too much sometimes. Sometimes personally, I can bite off more than I can chew, or I just want to do it all. And I realize that I need to step back, look at the situation, prioritize the needs, and go after personal work that way and professional work that way. Sometimes I want to see the good in all things. And that's not necessarily a weakness, but sometimes it can blind you. But I want Dickson County to be the best school system professionally. I know we can get better. We're good, but let's get better. I want engaged leadership to occur where we're hands-on and very effective in making sure that the folks we serve, they feel valued. Personally, I want to make sure that I'm doing what I need to do personally for my family, for my health. So sometimes putting those things, my health off, I had a Coke tonight. That's a no-no. But doing things like that. So both professionally and personally is just staying the course.
What do you think about when the data shows that a child does not need to go to the next grade when he or she, and I'm not talking about state testing, I'm talking about when he or she fails that teacher's letter grade and gets an F? What do you think about retaining that kid in that grade until they can get their grades up to where they should be, a passing grade?
Well, I was a teacher, and I know you're talking about grades. There's data, and then there's grades with data. Grades can be subjective, but I know that our teachers work hard to look at rubrics when they grade work to make sure that it is on grade level and it meets grade level standards. I have a son that's in the system, and he's asked to make sure that he is looking at English on English standards and that he is passing that. Some students do fail grades and what teachers are asking them to do outside of test scores, but our teachers are teaching on standards so that some of those grades are encompassed by our benchmark data that we do. Different than state data, but that benchmark data is a predictor of what could happen at the end with state data. So if students aren't doing the work on grade level and they're not meeting the benchmark to the standard, then that's going to show us that they're not on the trajectory to be successful at the next grade level. And when they're not on that trajectory, guess what begins to happen? Gaps. And so we've got to get down to why the student is failing. One of the things we need to do is make sure that we are communicating with parents. There may be something going on in that child's life that we're not privy to. So talking to that child, there may be a divorce or a death in the family. So we need to get down to the heart of why this F is occurring. That would be one of the priorities, and I know that our teachers are doing that. Then we have to come up with a plan. As a teacher in the classroom, that's not satisfactory. I know that when I was a teacher, when students failed, I failed. So getting down to the root of the F, hopefully we're going to turn that child around through supports of tutoring, through supports that our teachers. I'll give you an instance. I don't believe in C's at my house unless you're in biochemistry or nuclear science. I didn't when my girls were in college. My son wanted to bring home a C. And I'm like, let's look at this grade. But a C to me as a parent was an F.
He just want to be average, Mama.
Well, he is a lot different than my girls. But I think you have to get down to the root of the problem and communication with parents. Sometimes parents don't see those grades. I mean, I had to ask over and over, where is your progress report? And I'm in the system. I knew when it was. So I think getting down, building relationships with students, but there's a reason for that F. And we've got to get down to what that is. So grades are different than state tests, as you alluded to, but they're all encompassing of assignments, benchmark tests that are predictors to the state test. So getting down to the root of that F is paramount for that student. Going back to, you asked me, is it okay to fail students? I think when we've exhausted all avenues, we're doing or asking students to come to tutoring, when we're talking to parents, and if it is they have gotten so far with the gap that they're behind even when they walked into that grade, I would have to look at all avenues, but it may behoove that student to be successful to repeat. But I would have to look at that very seriously.
Thank
But
you.
my hope would be that we could get that turned around
Sure.
as professionals.
Middle of summer is going to be our new director's first 100 days.
Yeah.
So what, if you're hired as the director, what do you want to accomplish in your first 100 days?
Well, if you got to look at my portfolio in tab 3, I did write a 120 day, if I were selected as superintendent, a plan of action. So the first 30 days, I need to build relationships. You've alluded to that. I need to build relationships with all stakeholders. I need to share what my vision as a leader is. I need to share that with my leadership team. I want to make sure that I am out and about in our community. I want people to know that I love Dickson County. I love Dickson County schools, and we are here. We're good, but we want to push to get better. So if you looked at tab 3, you would see the first 120 days, and it's very lengthy. I'm going to be working a lot. So, and I'm about the work. So building relationships, passing a budget that's upon us, getting to know the work deeply. Right now, I'm in the midst of the work that I'm responsible for deeply. But we want to make sure that my work is handled and we don't miss a beat. So that's going to have to be a priority. And then getting out into our schools, meeting teachers. One of the things that I read on the survey was from teachers, I just want Dickson, the leadership, to know my name. That's what teachers, not just one, there's a couple of those on there, and that resonated with me. And I want to get to know teachers. Now, I don't think I'm going to know all 700 names, but I'm going to try when I get out in schools to know who I'm visiting, to know who I'm talking to. That's something personal. It's about building relationships. So it's going to move fast the first 120 days, but it's going to be good work. But building relationships is the priority. County Commission, with you as a board, with leadership team here at this office, with teachers, principals, assistant principals. It's a big system to get out there and build relationships. So I'm ready for the work.
Thank you.
We hear a lot about data-driven decisions. Do you think other factors need to be used in evaluating if a teacher or student is successful?
Absolutely. The state tests are not the end-all be-all. However, the state tests do have a big reflection on a district. You recently saw report card grades for each of our schools. And I believe that in one of the interviews, I think it was Mr. Vandervoort, one of the things that showed a district's success was not only how organizations outside of these walls view us, but it was having level 5 schools. So data is very important, but there's other pieces that need to be looked at. Attendance, behavior, grades, which are subjective. However, they're based on the work of the grade. They're based on the standard. We have to look at the whole child. When you look at the whole child, you're looking at the emotional and mental aspects as well. So just because a child failed a test, it's not failure for life. And so we need to make sure that we understand that. You know, we have teachers that struggle. They leave our profession every day across this state because they're a level 1 and level 2 teacher. And so we need to look at that. That doesn't mean you're a failure for life, but what can we as a system do to help you grow professionally? Maybe it's the depth of the standard. Maybe it's not understanding the high rigorous questions and you mimicking that and modeling that through your classroom. But we've got to help people get better so that the data reflects that work. And so we don't want to think data to be negative. When I go to the doctor and they draw my blood, I want the data, because data can show me what is to come if I don't fix it. So data can be very important. Such is that in a school system with student data. You know, if we have students that are missing 37 days or more, that's a telling story. We need to really wrap our arms around that student and find out why we're missing school that much. Because if we don't, it's going to create larger issues moving forward. We need to look at data on schools. How many students are at Charlotte? How many students are at Stuart Burns? Because then we're going to have to make decisions on the capital outlay budget in building buildings. So that is data, attendance of our students and families. So data can be very important in making very strategic decisions throughout our district.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I suppose I've been on the inside more than others on the board. So I do want to ask you some questions.
Sure, absolutely.
And I apologize I didn't mean to bring it up in front of everybody, but
We take a 5-minute break, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
I would like to meet with you and
We're going to take 5 minutes.
Okay,
break.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
got an upcoming meeting Thursday night with the legislative. We can make future decisions on what we do.
Was the legislative meeting, what time?
6 o'clock. Then we will meet here at 7:30 for a special session.
Move adjourned.
Second.
Thank you.